was really upset about the way that my marker is showing up, but I already know that I need to get some new ones. I really like these. These are the Winsor and Newton Pro Marker. Let's see if it's gonna focus. Pro markers. And they have a really nice range in skin tone colors. And I bought these, it's been a while. And like I said, I know I need a new box, but I'm like, I'm going to use it to the very end because this is just in my sketchbook. This is not like a final project. But I also wanted to ensure that I keep checking in with y'all. I guess I'm starting this series where I sketch and talk a little bit about some of the art news that I have read either throughout the evening from yesterday or something that I saw like randomly this morning. I wake up really early and end up scrolling, and most of the times I try to be mindful of what I'm, consuming when I do scroll. And so I try to make it like art centered. Anywho, I came on yesterday and talked about a few different things. One of the things I did not anticipate to run across last night was an article that mentioned an update from Amy Sherald. So, July 24th, the news broke about Amy Sherald, who is a Black woman, visual artist. You know her work. She did the piece that was uh, featuring Michelle Obama. She also did, oh my goodness, I can't remember this Black woman's young name. I was gonna say Rakia Boyd, but that's not her name. But y'all know Michelle Obama, the Michelle Obama piece. But so her one of her art pieces that was in this tour called American Sublime. That's been, going across the United States, exhibiting in different museums, was supposed to stop at the Smithsonian. And the news broke July 24th that Amy Sherald rescinded the offer for the exhibition to be at the Smithsonian because they wanted her to change one of her pieces. And the piece is called Transforming Liberty. And I did a video on this almost a month ago. It's probably like 3 weeks ago. So y'all can check that out on my channel. I'll also link it in the comments. So I'm not gonna go too much into that, but I wanted to just um respond to some of the things that Amy said in her op-ed. It's not very often that an artist put out an op-ed. Oh, thank you. Um, I started this yesterday. I started this part yesterday while I was talking on the morning sketch, and then I added these few little details last night. And I was thinking about strawberries, so I was like, let me just throw some strawberries um, on here while I chop it up with y'all about this Amy Sherald op-ed. Um, and so so artists don't write op-eds that often. And so I thought that was very powerful. One of the things that I plan to do is see, has she written any other op-eds before this one? But it dropped on MSNBC's website on August 24th, so 2 days ago. And like I said, I ran across this yesterday when I was just looking up, you know, what was trending in art news, and so I saw that she had this op-ed up. So it's on MSNBC's website, and it's called Censorship Has Taken Hold at the Smithsonian. I Refuse to Play Along. History shows us what happens when governments demand that museums perform loyalty. And I have this op-ed linked on my YouTube page in the community post. So if you want to check it out, which I strongly recommend that you do, it is linked there, but you can also just Google, Amy Sherald op-ed, and it'll come up. Um, but just right off the bat, a quick overview of my thoughts. An excellent op-ed. It was written beautifully. It was very well researched. She incorporates a lot of historical kind of context to how the government or how federal rules impact cultural institutions, which I thought was powerful. Um, it's very interesting. I was listening to a video from, I think it was on MSNBC, but it was a segment where Nicole Hannah Jones, uh, I guess you would call her a founder or the initial research person on the 1619 project, and she came on to give her opinion and thoughts on what's happening with the Smithsonian and Trump and cultural institutions. And she talked about this as well, this historical context. And one of the things that I found interesting with Nicole Hannah Jones and also Amy Sherald's commentary on how the government gets involved in art and culture and what does that mean, you know. They did not speak about Reagan. So Nicole Hannah Jones talked about kind of the comparison to um, the time period with Hitler. She referenced that in relation to what's happening with cultural institutions and what gets to be classified as culture. And Amy Sherrill talks about this as well, but she keeps it more in the US context. And I found it interesting that neither one of them spoke about Reagan's involvement with that. And I've done some research on that as well. And I've been trying to put together a video on federal involvement in arts and culture, and what does that mean for our cultural institutions and also memory. What gets transmitted, what gets kept, what gets thrown out, what gets funded, and what does that mean even for the way that artists show up based on funding, and what is considered priority, right? So going back to the op-ed, very well researched, very well written. On my page, I also talk about, I shared a link to a fashion designer. His name is Edward Buchanan. And in the clip, he talks about being left out of Bottega Veneti's fashion history book. And my art centers erasure and the mental health impacts of erasure. And so I like to listen to, read, watch whenever artists specifically talk about the experience of erasure. And so to see Amy Sherrill, highlighting that in this op-ed, I think is really important. She gives some really amazing, thank you so much. She gives some really amazing quotes and also just advice and confirmations for artists in this piece. So again, I strongly recommend that if you have, any interest in creativity, any desire to, just get some encouraging words from a different perspective, from like an art perspective, I strongly recommend that you check out this op-ed. Let's see. I'm just looking for another color. Okay, so let's see. Where was I at? Um, put some red in here. Okay, so the op-ed just shares not only more on the current times that we're in related to art censorship and what that means. Um, Again, Amy Sherald gives some really good historical context around like presidential, federal involvement in arts and culture and what gets named as arts and culture. The other kind of tea that she drops closer towards the end of the article that I think is really important as well, is that she talks about the other kind of issues that have been going on, at the Smithsonian. One of the things that maybe folks don't know, is that Trump had identified that he wants to review many cultural institutions. That includes 21 museums, research centers, and I can never pronounce this word, but it's the word for like a greenhouse. Um, it starts with an A, and a zoo. But these are all very interesting places that Trump wants to review and kind of see what's going on, right? But she highlights the other issues that were going on in the Smithsonian. Let me try to find that really quickly. Oh, here they are. Um, so she says, though a spokesperson from the Smithsonian disputed my claim that my work was being policed, multiple incidents since then included mentions of Trump's impeachments being removed from an exhibit on presidential impeachments and his complaint last week that the Smithsonian is out of control and focuses too much on how bad slavery was. Um, Helps make her point. So basically, she's trying to highlight that her deciding to not move forward with the exhibition is also within the context of these other things going on, in the Smithsonian related to how the White House um, wants to erase, keep certain histories, hidden, remove certain things, right? Omit history, especially related to the impeachment piece. And so I think that is important too, related to this conversation around artistic liberty, being confident about making the decisions that you do related to where you show your work, exhibit your work. I think the other thing that Amy Sherald's um, decision also highlights is that you can change your mind. I'm in addition to, wearing many different hats, I'm also a therapist and I'm licensed in multiple states and many of my clients identify as creatives and artists. And that is one of the things that I work with them a lot on, is that it's okay for you to change your mind. If something does not feel aligned anymore, whether that's values, the vibes are off, whatever it is. If you decide that you change your mind about something, that's okay, and I feel like her just continuing talk about this, because she could have just, and she meaning Amy Sherald, she could have just left the conversation where it's been, because again, this happened about a month ago, and her op-ed that she wrote, that dropped 2 days ago. You know, I love the fact that she is continuing to give more context and highlight. Again, from my perspective, her sharing this hopefully highlights for folks that yeah, you can change your mind. If the vibes are off, you can do something different. Um, let's see. I've just been yapping, yapping, yapping. Uh, okay. I guess I needed to reboot a little bit. Um, the other thing that I wanted to highlight in this as well, um, let's see. Oh, the other thing that I wanted to highlight too is that Amy Sherrill dropped some amazing, like, advice, things to consider around memory work. And she applies it to this collective memory, and kind of situates it within the museum, and that museums are places that activate opportunities for collective memory and also imagination, and that if we are censoring these spaces that have this particular function within our culture, within our society, what does that mean? If many of these spaces are predominantly upholding, this this ideology around Americanisms, right? That's the word that they use in the article. Again, like shifting more towards like these whatever American traditional cultures are, whoever gets to determine what that means, right? Like if that is the vibe of these spaces that historically have been to ignite memory and remembrance, and everything is shifted towards these values around Americanisms, what are we saying these spaces are activating, right? So I thought that was also powerful. Um, One of the quotes that she says that kind of highlights that is, control the memory and you control the future, right? Um, Let me see really quickly. This That quote also made me think about Janelle Monae's book. I can't think of the name of it though, because it's all about memory keeping as well. Duh, the memory librarian. Duh. Yeah. This Amy Sherrill's piece and many of the things that she's talking about in this article makes me think about Janelle Monae's book, The Memory Librarian, and other stories of of the dirty computer. Um, yeah, this is, let's see, it's a collection of short fiction by Janelle Monae and other writers. It has themes of like Afrofuturism, cyberpunk, kind of vibes going on. But it talks about, like, one of the main stories talks about a memory librarian and what does it mean to be the keeper of memories, right? So when we think about that quote from Sherald, control the memory and you control the future. Like, yeah, that just sparked my memory of that book and like the vibes of it and, where we are right now in this time. Um, okay. The other thing that I just wanted to also keep centering is why and how I got interested in following art censorship um, in the media. About three, and I found out yesterday because I talked about this yesterday in my morning sketch video. Um, how I got interested in art censorship. And I thought it was 2 years ago that I came across this exhibition, but it was actually three. This exhibition happened in 2022. It was uh, it was an exhibition in Escondido at the California Center for Arts with an artist named OG Slick. And his art piece was called Three Slick Pigs. And in this picture, he depicts the police department as three little pigs. It got accepted into the art exhibition. It was, on display and everything. But the board members of the California Center for the Arts did not like what was being depicted. So um, there was a struggle back and forth with, the artist and whether or not it could continue to be displayed. And ultimately, um, the artist won. It continued to be displayed for the exhibition. Another art piece that I had run across. Actually, it was more around the lawsuit last 2 years ago, so 2023. I saw that there was an artist, Miami Beach. A mural had gone up on a wall that was memorializing a 22-year-old Haitian American that had been killed by the police. And the local city council did not want that mural up. So they fought for that mural to be removed, and they ultimately won. Um, they won the appeal for that art piece to be removed. And so since then, I have really been interested in when local government, so that can mean a nonprofit board. That can also mean like I said, like the local city council that gets involved related to arts and culture um, in censoring artists. And what does that mean, for artists that have to uh, engage in lawsuits, advocate for themselves related to being censored? Um, this ties back into one of the quotes that Amy Sherald mentions that I think is very powerful. Let me see if I can find it. She basically says that, oh, is it the first sentence? It's the quote where she says that museums are police and imagination. Um, Here it is. When governments police museums, they are not simply policing exhibitions, they are policing imagination itself. So I think there's something to be said um, about that. And when you have to fight for things like that, that's a very um, interesting experience, to fight for your creative voice, and fight for it within the criminal legal system, you know. Um, as an artist, how do you prepare for that, right? How do you heal from that? So that's how I got interested in art censorship and started following these different cases and lawsuits that popped up. Now, Amy Sherald is not a situation that is legal, but it's art censorship, right? In the video that I did, oh, these were supposed to be strawberries, and I ended up making cherries. That's fine. Um, Amy Sherrill is not, that situation is not going through litigation or anything. But like I said, it centers on um, art censorship. And in the video that I did maybe like 3 weeks ago, you can find it on my page. I also link it in the comments once this is over. I go through um, the uh, the ask that the Smithsonian put forth to Amy Sherrill to change her art piece to make it more suitable, and so yeah, I think that it's interesting too, not only when artists are asked to change um, are questioned about their artwork in that particular way, but then someone else gives the artist ways that they can change their art piece, make it more suitable to be in that space, right? And then what does that mean for the artist? What are the things that you have to think about and consider related to those asks? I think Amy Sherald is someone who has, some interesting social capital. Um, I wonder what the outcome would have been for someone who maybe doesn't have the social capital that Amy has. So, meaning, someone who doesn't have that social or mainstream influence, right? Like Amy Sherrill can drop an op-ed on the MSNBC um, platform about her experience, like she can put out a statement about what happened to her. Um, it'll get picked up, her story got picked up by so many different mainstream news outlets, like what does that look like in everyday community kind of access, to these galleries or smaller museums or, just other museums where we're not talking about an artist that has that kind of social capital when you're being asked to constrain, what you're doing. So those are the things that I find interesting related to art censorship and why and how I ended up down this rabbit hole. I am very excited to talk more about actually federal involvement in arts and culture. Like I said, I started researching Reagan a little bit more because his involvement in the arts and culture world actually shifted the pay the pay model for how artists, can kind of show up in community. And I can share more about what I mean in a separate video related to that. But those are the things. That was like the one main thing that I read last night. In art news that was really interesting was the fact that Amy Sherald had written an op-ed. And then I wanted to just give some additional background and info on why and how I got interested in art censorship and art law. And when artists have to go to court related to their art pieces and the messages that they are highlighting. There's been a lot of artists that have actually put forth some freedom of speech lawsuits around Palestine, and quite a few of them have won. I saw one actually today when I was scrolling about an artist in Colorado. I think this was the artist that was in Vail. They had a exhibition in Vail or Breckenridge, one of those Aspen, not Breckenridge, either Vail or Aspen. It was one of those mountain towns. This indigenous artist had a piece that talked about Palestine, and it was removed from the exhibition. And I saw that that person won their freedom of speech lawsuit, you know. Um, so we will continue to see. Um, we'll continue to see this in the art world. There's definitely a reckoning kind of happening, a pushback that's happening within the art space, especially, and it's not just the pushback centered on like what the government is saying and doing, but it's a call for these institutions to use their power and have a backbone, push back on the government related to what they're asking you to do because it's just trickling down to the artists and that's not right. So I saw two articles in the art newspaper that I want to circle back to at some point today. So I'll probably come back on tomorrow. Well, not I'll probably, I will come back on tomorrow and probably talk about those two things. Because I don't see anybody else covering how this pushback, how these constraints are showing up in the art world and like what is going on. It's very parallel to censorship, uh, and freedom to protest, right? Like it's parallel. It's the same thing, just different spaces, right? We see how activists, organizers, peaceful protesters are being labeled, especially Black and Brown protesters are being labeled, hostile and things like that. Um, Being overly policed, charges, happening, situations where police are being violent with people who are peacefully protesting. And then parallel that to the art world, again, it's the same but different. Like I said, the art censorship pieces that I've been following, Amy Sherald is a little bit different because the piece that was censored for her was related to trans identity. The artwork that I've been following has been more related to when the artist is highlighting things like police brutality, and when the local government gets involved and wants that silence, right? So I want to keep following where artists are pushing back and resisting. I think that's super important to focus on again because I have this mental health background. I am always centering like the mental health impacts of state violence and having to get involved in these things alongside, your work attempting to be erased, right? You're fighting for something that is attempting to be silenced, and unfortunately, many of the times the the space with more power wins, right? And what does that mean for your imagination as an artist after something, after you have an experience like that? Um, so I will see y'all. I'll see y'all tomorrow.